All right. Well, I am super excited to be joined once again, actually for the third time on this podcast, Mr. Joe Sanok. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. What about you, Daniel?
I'm doing great. It's been a little bit of a crazy morning. That whole work-life balance thing with getting the kids to school and doctor's appointments and all that fun stuff. But I'm super excited to be here and excited to start the day and dive in with you. You're my first person I'm chatting with today, so I'm super excited.
Awesome. I hear that like dadpreneur stuff this morning. My daughter's like, one of them has a runny nose and
Yeah.
she just like wouldn't put cream on her nose for the last 3 days. And now it like really hurts. And it's just,
Oh,
we weren't late to school, but we were behind where we normally are. But yeah,
yeah.
you just like have to jump right into being a dad and then being a preneur.
Yeah. I'll be honest, it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I'm still trying to learn that balance. And it's kind of like mind shifting, like, okay, we had this crazy morning. How do I shed that and really, jump in, be present and focused on, the things that I'm working on. So. All right. Well, let's jump in. So last time we spoke about your book, Thursday is the New Friday. Since we spoke, I had time to finish the book, and so there's a few things that I would love to just chat about and just kind of dive in a little bit deeper. And thanks again for writing the book. I mean, there was a lot in there that really challenged me or just reminded me of things that I either heard you say or have maybe been thinking about. And so, it was a good journey. So, and just, congratulations again for writing a book. That's awesome.
Oh, thanks so much.
All right. Well, so in towards the beginning of the book, you talk about inclinations, and you're really kind of like teeing up, some of the things uh, that are internally that we are inclined to do or not do. So tell me a little bit more about what those inclinations are, and then we'll just kind of take the conversation from there, and hope to just kind of dig into like why do our inclinations matter? How do they help us be successful or maybe hinder our success? So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, as I was entering into the research and learning how people think about working fewer hours, but either maintaining or increasing their income, I really was interested in like a big picture flow. And that's really what the book mirrors is we start with your internal inclination. So what's going on inside, then we step into slowing down and then we step into killing it, knowing that you can't go hustle, hustle, hustle if you're just burned out all the time. We have to actually
Yeah.
slow our brains down. And so that first section of the internal inclinations, for a lot of people, I think was unexpected because, we start talking about the 4-day work week, we talk about the research and the history and all that, and then we go
Yeah.
internal. But when it comes down to it, whether it's a CEO of some huge company that wants to switch to the 4-day work week or just a solo counselingpreneur, it starts inside. We're all making these individual decisions every single day. Like you just said, switching from being a dad to being a podcaster, then doing all
Yeah.
these other things, it's always inside. And so if we start with it's an individual decision as to how we enter into the world, that means we have to first just know, what's the ground that we're dealing with. In the same way, if you're planting a garden, you got to know what you're dealing with. Does it need something? Does it need extra nutrients? Does it need extra water? Is it super full of clay? And then we decide what we're going to do based on that ground. Same sort of thing is we want to look internally and see what are our natural inclinations. So there's 3 internal inclinations that the research shows that high achieving entrepreneurs, business people, implementers have. So it's curiosity, it's an outsider perspective, and the ability to move on it. And so if we dig into each of those 3, what we see is that the average top level performer is naturally inclined towards most, if not all 3 of those. And so their curiosity is coming very naturally. They have the ability to think like an outsider and they don't overthink things and they move on it.
So and well, just before I ask that question, I just want to say like that. I love that. I love like starting with that internal stuff because for me, my journey, I have realized as you get into business building, and I think this applies to everybody, there's things inside that come to the outside. There's things that maybe you haven't understood or learned about yourself that really get amplified. Once you start growing a business, once you start putting yourself out there, once you start growing a team and leading and all that sort of stuff. So I love that the book starts with that internal stuff because, like you said, if we're not getting that right, we're not understanding that, it's going to hinder us further down the road. And so I want to dig into, actually, I want to dig into all three of these things. So curiosity, outsider approach, and ability to move on it. So talk to me a little bit more about curiosity. And this was the one that really stood out to me in the book, was that ability to be curious. So what do you mean by that? And how does that apply to private practice or business building?
Yeah, I always want to dig into the history of how did we get here when I'm talking about specific topics. So even just starting with this chapter, I started with a blank whiteboard. Just what are my questions that I have about curiosity? Where did these things come from? What comes to mind?
You're
Curiosity killed
you're
the
curious
cat.
about
All
curious.
yeah, exactly. But like even curiosity killed the cat. This thing that we all hear. If I said curiosity killed, everyone would say the cat.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? 1910, this lady loses her cat in a chimney. This curious cat just was like
Yeah.
going in the chimney, and it made national news. It was the front page of the Washington Post when the cat died. Like curiosity killed the cat. And so if we just think about that being something that we hear, whether it's as kids or teenagers or adults, if you're curious, you're going to die. Don't go down the alley, you're going to die. Don't
Right.
go investigate that cave, because in every TV show, the waters rise and you die. And so is that true? Is the kind of the next question for me is, does curiosity kill people? Well, of course it does sometimes, but what's the value of curiosity? It was probably 2 or 3 months ago. I had my nieces over. They live in our same neighborhood. So my daughters are 10 and 7. My nieces are 6 and 4. So 4 girls, ages 4 to 10, outside squealing, playing, jumping, just playing out in the yard. And I'm inside doing dishes or something, kind of keeping an eye on them. And but the noise level made me know that they're all fine, until it got very quiet. And then I knew it was time to go investigate. So I go
Yep.
outside, and all 4 of them are standing in a circle around a dead mouse that they found.
Hmm.
And to hear their little conversations of, how do you think this mouse died? Do you think an owl will eat this mouse? Do owls eat live mice or only dead mice? Like, how do they find dead mice? Should we do a mouse funeral? What do you say to mouse funeral? Like this
Oh.
hilarious conversation of these little kids. And as kids, that's what the world is. It's being curious, it's understanding. My 18-month niece just the other day was outside walking on grass for the first time, and
Hmm.
her mind was blown. She was like someone that was like tripping on LSD. She was just like looking at her feet and amazed that there was
Yeah.
sand sticking to it. But that's what kids' brains are doing. They're constantly figuring out, is this normal? Is this something that happens all the time? This car accident, this rainbow, these things, is that just a normal part of humanity that I haven't noticed? Or
Yeah.
is it something that I need to pay attention to that might be scary, or it might be, harmful, or maybe it's beautiful? And so our whole lives as kids are determining what's normal and what's outside of the norm. And when we enter into the business world and into adulthood, oftentimes we feel like we've figured a lot of that out. And then when we
Yeah.
look at what perpetuates that is, a higher education system that's very systemic in regards to, you learn this, you get graded on this. Don't remain curious. Don't step outside of the box, which is all based on the industrialist model. And so the top performers are people that stay curious. So they run a Facebook ad campaign that maybe stretches their budget. They spend the whole budget and they don't get the click-throughs that they want. They don't make the sales they want. Of course, I'd be bummed if that happened, but beyond that, like bummership, would be that I'm going to say, okay, I learned about my audience. I learned that they like this thing enough to click on it, but they don't like enough to purchase it. That sales
Yeah.
page needs some differences. We need to do some A/B testing. So the curious folks are the ones that really achieve, because they don't see it as pass fail.
Yeah, no, that's really good, and I know that. So for me, it's been a journey in learning how to remain with that sort of childlike curiosity. And now that I'm a dad, so I have a 5-year-old and a just turned 1-year-old, and so you can see that every single day they're curious. The 1-year-old is curious in like simple things of like what happens when I crawl out the back door, whereas the 5-year-old is, I'm curious if I want to take this thing apart, or like learn how this thing works, or how do I create something with these with clay, or right now he just got a whole box of slime, so how can I like mix the slime together and all that sort of stuff. And so like it's that whole learning about the world, like you said. And I know I totally lose that sometimes. I get so focused on, this client needs this, or we have to fix this in the business, or I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with this marketing. And so it's a constant sort of habit to try to bring it back around to okay, like let me take myself out of this here, stop being so emotional about it, and like let's get curious. Like, okay, what happened with this launch? Like, or why did people not click on this ad? And just and from that learning, I think you really that's where like the growth happens. But if you do the thing and then you're not curious about it, then and you're not learning, you're not taking the lessons to apply to the next thing you do, then that's kind of where you stand still.
Well, and yeah, so often, we see a problem in front of us and we just keep working on it, working on it, working on it, and we can't break through. And when we step away for a day or an hour and we come back to it, it takes 10 seconds to do it. In the same way, if you
Yeah.
do a Sudoku puzzle and you can't find a number and then you come
Yeah.
back after having a cup of coffee, it's like, oh, that 7 was there the whole time.
Yeah.
uh, so I think that it kind of taps into that idea of slowing down as well, where to have those new eyes entering into projects, that was part of the reason that for every chapter I had a full structure of what I planned and intended to go through. What research had I gathered, what
Yeah.
case studies and stories, but then to just start with a blank whiteboard, not my computer, and just brainstorm, and then to go down those paths. So I watched a bunch of random YouTube videos on curiosity. I did Google Scholar to just see what were some of the top curiosity research studies to see if it just sparked something new. I read a bunch of old CIA DARPA files just because it was like recently declassified, and thought, well, maybe there's something in here. Some of that made it into the book, most of it didn't. But to just be able to be curious with it as I was writing it, in our private practices, we want to do the same thing. So maybe we're writing a blog post about anxiety. If we were to just stop and say, sure, we're going to talk about the 5 major symptoms of anxiety, or, in what situations are women in their 30s anxious, or, men in their 50s anxious. So yeah, great blog post. But to just step back before we do that and say, like, why does this matter? Like, what does that mean to this 50-year-old man that's feeling anxious? Like, he can't go to family gatherings. He doesn't hang out with his friends when he wants to. And to have those new eyes then makes our work that we do in the world so much more robust.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. That stepping away and coming back. I love that. My new thing is Rubik's Cubes. So my
Ooh.
son got given a Rubik's Cube and he's like, Daddy, fix this. And so I learned how to do it. And so now, and he got me one for my birthday. And so that's kind of my like step away. It just sits on the shelf and I'm like, oh, let me just sit and work on the Rubik's Cube. And it totally takes my mind off of other things, gives me that pause, and then kind of to come back and jump into stuff. So that's been kind of just, it's kind of, it seems silly at first, but I was like, this is actually like helping me, my mental focus by stepping away and focusing on this and then coming back to, the problems that I'm trying to solve.
I have to just tell you a quick story that has nothing to do about private practice, but it
Do
does
it.
have to do with Rubik's Cube. So I was hanging out with Dr. Jeremy Sharp. He has the Testing Psychologist podcast. So his son is huge into Rubik's Cubes, and Rubik's Cubes, I didn't realize how advanced they are now. They have these ones that have Bluetooth enabled. Do you know about this?
I didn't
Like,
know
it's
about the
crazy.
Bluetooth, but I've seen some of the new versions that are just like hundreds of moving pieces and it's insane.
Well, so this one has Bluetooth that connected to an app. And so you start with
Wow.
a Rubik's Cube that's already like, it's perfect. And then they set it up and then in a certain way, like do these things. And then you go against other people online to like try to beat them. I was like,
That's
my mind was blown.
crazy.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it's insane, but
That's
way to
awesome.
stay relevant, Rubik's Cube.
That's so cool. Awesome. Okay, so let's get back into to wrap up like our conversation on curiosity. Are there like a couple of just like quick tips you can give people to grow your curiosity, grow your curiosity, and how we apply that, to private practice?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is in both our personal and our professional lives to do this exercise of like, what if this wasn't an option? And so we often call this in Audience Building Academy, take the blinders off. So there's a take the blinders off exercise. So imagine that you feel like, I need to hire this 1099. You just keep running into blockades. Okay, what if that wasn't an option anymore? Like, what if we just said the option you're focused on wasn't an option? Let's
Mm.
brainstorm 3 to 5 other options. So I often see this with people that maybe are launching a new product, or they're launching a new e-course, or oftentimes even within their niche in their private practice, it's just not clicking along. Okay, say men in their 40s just isn't a niche that's even available anymore, and you've been like the guy's therapist forever, and it's just not clicking. What
Mm.
would you do? And so just to allow yourself to brainstorm, and I'd say in your personal life too, to think about that with your kids. Maybe you're in a rut every weekend where it's kind of the same sort of thing. We get pizza on Friday, we watch a movie, and then we go to soccer on Saturday, whatever your thing is.
That's
What if
actually
that
my plans for this weekend, Joe. Like
like
literally.
like what if that wasn't the plan? What if it
Yeah.
was, we're gonna make soup from scratch and then we're gonna go for a
Mm,
hike? Whoa, what?
yeah.
What? So just allowing our brains to try some new things.
Yeah.
When we're in a new situation, we're more hyper vigilant. We're paying attention more to safety and security, and it allows us to have our brains just feel different than when we're
Yeah.
in that typical schedule. So the more that we can disrupt that and just try it in little ways, it's going to boost that creativity.
Yeah. Awesome. That's good. All right. So take us into the next internal inclination. So the outsider approach. So what's that all about?
Yeah. So, when we look at top performers, oftentimes they have jumped industries, they've moved countries, their even personal history is often very disruptive where they've been an outsider. I mean, you look at Elon Musk, who moved how many countries, before the age of 18, Albert Einstein, all these kind of great thinkers that oftentimes were outsiders. And because of that, we're able to see things that other people couldn't see. And we know this intuitively. We've all probably had the experience where you're hired at a new job and the way they do things is crazy. I remember when I was hired at the community college, uh, I was hired to do counseling with folks, and there was a new client that was coming in, I don't know, in 15 minutes or so. And I said, can I have the file on this person? I just wanted to know if they'd been in, what was their academic concerns, they'd come in before. And the way that they did their filing was they had a handwritten calendar. And then they were filed by day they had come in. So the front desk person had to look through the entire handwritten calendar and then find out they came in on May 5th and then pull out the May 5th file, not by last name. So this is ridiculous. So I helped them switch over to, and this was 2010. This wasn't like the
Wow.
80s.
Yeah.
So lots of options with digital ideas. But so you go into these new jobs oftentimes and you see that the way people do things is just completely crazy. But that's what happens. We know from Parkinson's law that work expands to time given, but also that there's natural bloating within an organization. And that natural bloating, once a system is put in place, it's near impossible to change that system unless something really explodes that, or there's some intention from the higher ups. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we look at an outsider perspective, we find that actually statistically outsiders have more influence than insiders. There's this really interesting study called the color study where they brought in groups of 6 to 8 people. They showed them the color green or the color blue, and they said that's green, that's blue. And there's a little disagreement over maybe some of the shades that were in the middle, but not enough to really be statistically significant. Now, in the second version of this study, they brought in 6 to 8 people, but 2 of those folks were working with the researchers. And there were specific colors that when they showed them, they would say the opposite of it, even though it was very clear that that was green or that was blue. And they found that statistically, they had more influence over the group than they should have. And they've replicated this study over and over, showing that
Wow.
outsiders frequently have more influence on an internal group than the insiders, which kind of goes against what we would think. If you're joining a new group of people, to think that you may have more influence than the people that have been established within that, that goes against often the power that we think we may have in a new situation.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, that's interesting. Like what you just said, of just like that almost confidence boosting in that you can step into new situations, recognize that you're an outsider, and it's okay to think differently and to apply, what you learned and your expertise to the situation.
And if
And
anything, it points to that's a superpower. So a
yeah,
lot of folks that I consult with say, well, I want to consult with businesses on psychological things, on active listening. But they're like, but I don't have an MBA, but I've never been in the business world. But then when you actually talk to businesses about what they want, it's the basics of active listening. It's the basics of crisis management. And then
yeah,
these therapists enter into this business world and say, why didn't I do this years ago? I'm now charging $1,000 an hour to tell them how to actively say, it sounds like you feel sad.
right.
So the opportunities when we start to put ourselves in these uncomfortable situations really opens up doors that we never could have entered into.
Yeah, and I think too, like one thought that comes to mind for me is also the idea of welcoming an outsider. Like you said, like bringing someone into when you start a new job, you can kind of easily recognize, oh, this isn't working, or this could be better. And so when you're hiring a team and you've got your processes in place, for me, this is what I've been trying to do as I bring someone on. It's recognizing and giving them power, like, hey, I know this is what we've built as far as the process goes, but you have full authority to let me know, like, if this is not working for you, because you're the one who's in it day to day, to make it better. And so there can be also that sort of learning process of applying an outsider to what you've already built.
Daniel, that's such a great point, because I think that sometimes the tendency of business owners is, I built this, this is my baby, this is my business. And
Yeah.
then they're really defensive over how they've decided to do things. Even within Practice the Practice, we have a saying internally: proceed until apprehended. I want people to lead with curiosity and to try
Yeah.
things. And then if they screw up, we'll have that conversation, say, hey, like, you went too far, you
Yeah.
didn't do it correctly, whatever. But I would rather people lead with that curiosity and creativity and just proceed without me getting in the way, so that we can try new things and see what works.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about the third point. So move on it, ability to move on it. So tell me more about that.
Yeah. So there's times in life that you really want things to be accurate. So if I go in for surgery, I want my doctor, I want her to take as much time as she needs to be accurate
Yes.
with that surgery. So let's just start with, there are times that you really need to be accurate.
Yes.
But most of the business world, speed is going to overcome accuracy most of the time. But our entire educational system, which we talked about a little bit earlier, is set up to say, you work on this paper, you do a draft, you go to the writing center, you might get a little feedback from your peers, but eventually you turn in this thesis, you turn in this dissertation, and then you pass or you fail. Most of business is not pass fail the first time. If I
Yeah.
write a blog post and someone says, you misspelled this word, you cited this incorrectly, whatever, we go in and we change it. So the idea that we have to overthink our work so much as if it were this pass fail, that's just not accurate. And so top performers are people that say, the speed and the feedback I get from implementing is going to be more valuable to me than doing it correct or accurate the first time. We don't have to build the entire thing right away. So for example, we launched this new thing called Audience Building Academy. So this was people that did a bulk book buy of Thursday is the New Friday. They were in this free mastermind group as part of that. Within that group, people said, what's next? What's after this? We've loved this. And so I did a whole bunch of interviews, walked through my process of going through their pain, what would their ideal product be, and then what would the price be that they would want to pay. And so walked through this entire kind of process to get, probably 20 interviews with people, to then say, what do they want? They want this type of program. They want it to be 6 months. They want it to be super milestone based. So within that, I didn't build that program the week before I create the slides for the next week. So this entire thing's not sketched out. I have the basic milestones that we're going to cover,
Yeah.
but it's not all sketched out. And so the idea of, I'm creating what this group that signed up for this really, really wants. And if for some reason we need some extra content, we need to adjust, we need to slow down or speed up, I can, because I haven't tried to make it perfect from the beginning. I'm trying to be as accurate as I need to be, but speed is more important than the accuracy when you're launching something new.
Yeah. This was a big one too for me when reading the book. And I think I actually tend to have an inclination towards move on it. I've certainly launched things that weren't perfect and needed to be fixed later, and learned a lot from it. But I do also speak to other people who, even just publishing a blog post, that's a big deal for them, and they're wondering why they're not getting traffic to their website. I'm like, well, you don't have content on your website, but there's like this holdup, and there's this fear. And so, like, what are some things that you can do to help build that, to flex that muscle, to do imperfect work and be okay with that?
Yeah, one of the big things you can do when you're ready to just absolutely kill it and get things done, is to set timers, to give yourself 15 minutes, 20 minutes to write a blog post, to give yourself 10 minutes to sketch out the structure of a blog post, to say, I'm going to email 20 people that I could go out for coffee with to network, to grow my practice. And I'm going to do all that in 20 minutes. I'm going to just have this email. I'm going to rock it out. I'm going to stand up, take a break, do some jumping jacks, do a plank, whatever you need to do, and then jump back in. When you have that extreme focus for a really short period of time, you're going to see really how much you can get done. We see this at Slowdown School every summer when we put it on, where we slow down for the first couple of days and people get massages, and we skip stones on the beach and hang out. And then the last 3 days, we just run full tilt towards their business. And we see so much happen. Michael Glavin, who's this amazing therapist out of Chicago, he sketched out, I want to say it was 7 chapters of a book that, seriously, for like a year, he was in a mastermind saying, I should do this book, I should sketch this book,
Wow.
like just was not getting things done. And then in one 20-minute sprint, it just came out of him. And so I would say giving yourself limited time, really understanding how you best sprint and get things done. And then, even kind of backing up from before that is making sure you're putting your best energy in when you have the most energy. And so if
Mm,
you know that your energy peaks at 10 to 11:30 a.m., because that's when your coffee kicks in, make sure you block that out for your most creative, most draining work that you want
yeah.
to level up. The things that are easier for you, do those first thing in the morning, do those last in the day. You save that great creative energy for those bigger projects.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing I'm hearing from you is like the intentionality of making the time for it, which I appreciate because we didn't really talk about fear and stuff like that because I think it's kind of clear. Like, yeah, I have a fear about publishing that blog post, but it's on my calendar to block out and do it. I'm going to get it done. It's sort of just
Mhm.
like pushing. You got to push past that just a little bit, block it out, and get it done. And also, too, taking that step back, you kind of went back to what we talked about earlier. It's like taking that time out to then move forward and kill it, as you say.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience as we wrap up our conversation?
Yeah, I think the biggest things are, it's not pass fail in regards to your internal inclinations. If you don't have one of them or all of them, that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't be a great entrepreneur. It's just saying this needs some development. We have a free assessment that we're giving to your audience. Usually, I think it's $59 usually, but that assessment walks people through where you at with each of the three internal inclinations. But then, even more importantly, it tells you, is this a habit that you're actually developing? And then, based on the data, what are the types of things that you could do to boost that? So you'll get 10 to 15 tips on, just like the things we were talking about. So as an outsider, find events where you are an outsider. Go to culturally diverse events, go into situations that just flex that muscle of not being in the inner crowd, and other tips like that, that people are really finding helps them build the muscle to make it feel like it's more of an internal inclination for themselves.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so we'll link that up in the show notes so you can get your hands on that assessment. And thank you so much, Joe, for joining me again for the third time. And always appreciate our conversations.
Daniel, thank you so much.